far, and nearly 200,000 people are displaced as the humanitarian crisis worsens. The United Nations is calling for an immediate truce as the two sides prepare for peace talks in the Ethiopian capital Addis Ababa. So far, neither side are backing down, and the head of the UN mission in South Sudan has warned of the dangers of continued fighting.
We have seen terrible acts of violence in the past 2 weeks. There have been killings and brutalities, grave human rights violations and atrocities committed. We have seen evidence of apparent ethnic or targeting of South Sudanese citizens on ethnic grounds. This can lead to a perpetual cycle of violence that can destroy the fabric of the new nation. We need to do everything possible to prevent such a cycle of violence between the communities of South Sudan.
And before we bring in our guests, let's take a closer look at the current conflict. As we mentioned a little earlier, President Kiir sacked his deputy Riek Machar in July last year. Last month, he accused him of attempting a coup, which led to fighting among their supporters. Machar denies the accusation, saying Kiir is violently purging his opponent. The violence has spread across the country, with rebels seizing control of several areas in the oil-rich north. And the conflict has also been marred by a surge in ethnic violence, pitting members of Kiir's Dinka tribe against Machar's newer community. Now let's bring in our guests now. The South Sudanese capital, Juba, are joined by Barnaba Mariel Benjamin, who is the Minister of Foreign Affairs of South Sudan, while in London, Chu Lam is the Chief of Staff to the Secretary General of the SPLM, and that's short for Sudan People's Liberation Movement. Here in Doha, Ali Verdi is here, and he's a senior researcher at the Rift Valley Institute. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us on the program. Ali Verdi, if I may start with you, and if you could perhaps give us the big picture here. 2 years ago, South Sudan was born, full of potential, resources and hope. Where did it all go wrong?
I think that potential is still there. South Sudan can still be a successful country, but it requires leadership that is prepared to do that. And so on both sides of the current dispute between Riek Machar and Salva Kiir, both sides need to find it within themselves to remember what it is to have a South Sudanese nation, and what South Sudan can be, and what can be done to restore or deal with the damage of the last few weeks and the fighting that's occurred.
And there is a lot of optimism over the negotiations that's expected to take place in Addis Ababa. But before we get to that, I want to throw this next question to Chu Lam. Now, is this an ethnic conflict with political overtones, or is this a political conflict exploiting deep ethnic tensions?
What we have in South Sudan is a conflict, whether it's political or ethnic. We have a conflict, and what we need to do is to try and to stop it as quick as possible. Now, the only way to do it is through dialogue, and I see that I commend President Kiir and former Vice President Riek for accepting to send delegation. This is a good start, but that's not where it would all be resolved without actually having a comprehensive dialogue, and that means bringing everybody who can change the situation and ensure peace in South Sudan, and that is through releasing of the detainees who represent the wide country, and they're from all part of South Sudan, and I believe these gentlemen have the power to try to resolve the current situation in South Sudan.
Now, Barnaba Mariel Benjamin, it has been said that the South Sudan government is basically targeting its ethnic rivals. Is this true?
That is not absolutely true. What had actually happened was an attempted coup after the failure of political solutions within the party, and former Vice President Dr. Riek Machar actually instigated within the presidential cards an attempt to take over the government, an elected democratic government by force. So there's no ethnic intention, because the Sudan People's Liberation Army is an army that contains the whole sector of the South Sudanese ethnic communities. And it is the national army of the country. It has got the constitutional mandate to defend the sovereignty and the constitution of this country. It is indeed unfortunate that the former vice president begins to recruit within its own ethnic group and agitating some members of the ethnic group within the national army, and that what brings the ethnic dimension. But I must say, yes, it's a struggle for power. And as we all know, we have a constitution that allows any South Sudanese to become the president of this country through the ballot box. And I think that is the only way that if former vice president would like to be the president of this country, he should have waited until the elections of 2015. He could either contest, if he has failed to get the chairpersonship of the party, of the ruling party, he has the other option of forming either his own party or competing as an independent candidate for presidency. It shouldn't have led to his rebellion as we see it today.
Now, I just want to bring in Ali Verji back into the discussion here. Now, Ali Verji, we've been saying here that this is a struggle for power. Is this a struggle between these two men, between Riek Machar and between the president of South Sudan, or is this, could we have put in two different men and this would not have been the case as well?
It's difficult to say. I think the responsibility for what's happened does have to rest on both the current president and the vice president, the former vice president. It's a hypothetical to discuss if other leadership had been there, but I think and I hope that both leaders can recognize that, you know, while there may have been faults committed on both sides, and it's not to say that they're equivalent in those faults, but that it's time to try and contain this before it gets any worse.
Certainly, and certainly there are efforts that will be taking place later in this week when negotiations take place in Ethiopia. Now, Barnaba, Mariel, Benjamin, both sides have agreed to come to the negotiating table. In the meantime, though, government troops vow to recapture Jonglei and Unity states. This doesn't seem to bode well for peace talks.
Well, as you know, that the IGAD countries had initiated 4 principles upon which this political issue could be resolved. But we must equally understand that the President Kiir is the elected President of the Republic under our constitutional establishment. And what is happening is that the forces of Riek are in fact attacking the positions where the government is in control. And this is a rebellion. It is incumbent on the constitutional authority of this country to protect its sovereignty and to maintain law and order, to protect its citizens and their properties. So really it is not the government that is on the offensive, it is the government positions being attacked that has been empowered by the constitution of this country.
Now,
as you said, it is not true it is not true that to say both the Unity State and Jonglei State are under full control of Dr. Riek's rebels. What has happened is that the capital of Unity State, yes, they are in, but the rest of the state has the presence of the government, as well as in Jonglei State, they are in Bor and people are fighting in the same place. And that's why the state of emergency was issued by a legal constitutional government, so that the law and order could be brought into place. And of course, Dr. Riek, of course, has refused any cessation of hostilities, and he goes on the attack.
Well, I want to bring up that point with Chu Lam now in London. Now, Chu Lam, we do know that part of the rebel army includes the very controversial ethnic militia, the White Army. How optimistic are you that this certain part of the army, the White Army, can be held, can be brought in to line and be able to observe a ceasefire if it's called for in order for negotiations to take place?
I would just like to clarify maybe a point or two that my view is under South Sudanese view as citizen of South Sudan, and also as a concerned citizen, and I'm not representing neither the government nor the rebel. But what I would like to say about that is that there will be more of these type of offenses against the government from the whole country if it's not contained. Because what will happen basically is that people will take sides based on the tribal lines or based on the ethnic lines. Now the Nuer, the White Army, majority are all from Nuer, and they came in aid of their fellow citizen, and also try to take response now on the claims or the rumors or of what took place in Juba back on the 15th of December or on the 16th of December. And there will be a lot of kind of positions like that made by any other group that feels that they were under attack. So based on that, we need to understand that what South Sudan needs at the moment is a national reconciliation. And that is based off involvement of every South Sudanese national and all people that the elders, religion leaders, that can come in the stake of saving the country. This is not about Riek Machar anymore. This is not about Salva, but this is about the country. History has proven to us that many good leaders come and go, but the country remains. And the people need to understand that without us uniting as one people, we'll always have problems like this arising from our country. We are barely 2 years, and we have a lot to achieve in terms of trying to narrow the gap and looking at all of us as one people. Now, nobody chooses what tribe they come from. This is something that we're all born into it. And we have the choice to either appreciate each other based on where we come from, or we could try to look at our differences, which can create such incidents and situations.
All right, and now, given the gap, as you mentioned, the political gap and the ethnic gap that exists in South Sudan, Ali Verji, how much optimism is there over these coming talks in Addis Ababa?
I think we have to hope that both sides find it within themselves to find peace, or at least as a start to find a ceasefire, a cessation of hostilities. Let's remember that the real victims of what's happened in the last few weeks, is not the president, nor is it Riek Machar. It's the citizens and the civilians of South Sudan displaced or killed or otherwise affected. So they're the real victims. So I think we should be optimistic and hope that the mediators can find the possibility for a ceasefire. But the talk shouldn't end there. There needs to be more than that. There needs to be this idea of reconciliation as well, but also accountability for what's gone on, and perhaps a recognition that personal political ambitions should not hold a nation hostage.
Indeed. Well, let's go on that line about accountability, and I want to throw this question to Chul Lam. Now, we know that talks will go ahead. We know that it's one thing to sit at a negotiating table, to sit and smile for the cameras, and to abide by international pressure to try to find some sort of ceasefire and some sort of national unity. But then again, will people be held accountable? Or how optimistic are you that people will be held accountable for the current atrocities that are happening?
In history, we have learned a lot of great unfortunate events that took place, such as in South Africa. Now, at the moment, it's not about justice, it's not about accountability, but rather it's about finding peace in South Sudan, ceasefire, and national reconciliation. Now, we could come back later to trying to go through the books and trying to find out who did what and find them accountable for their act. But at the moment, I think if we put justice before peace, then we will have a scenario of that we will look always of who did what, and we cannot narrow the gap that we have in between. Now, this is the same situation that's happening in South Sudan at the moment. We have 11 politicians that represent the whole country. These men, in my view, and many of South Sudanese view, that maybe the government is seeing that it is time to serve justice and hold them accountable for their act. But in other view, we could always see that these men can narrow the gap. They could bring an end to what's happening in South Sudan at the moment by encouraging national reconciliation. And maybe even if they go to Addis Ababa, they will not be representing Riek or nor Selva, but rather South Sudan in general. And these men, I believe, have a lot at stake, and we should look into more of peace rather than justice. We can always get back to justice. Now, in December, we lost a great man, Nelson Mandela, who had been served with a lot of unfairness, being in prison for 27 years. But upon his exit, he became the president, and he also taught the world of how to forgive. Mm-hmm.
Now,
this time
Barnaba,
it's about
I just need to move on the discussion. Barnaba Mariel Benjamin, I want to give you time too to answer to that question. Will there be peace before justice? Do you think people will be held accountable for the current atrocities?
I can assure you that the delegation that the President Salva Kiir had appointed is not